Okay everyone, so for today let's work on Python basics, and this is going to be useful especially if you're going to be creating your own hacking tools or some tools for automation. So learning some basic programming is going to be essential, and you understanding the scripts that you will be running when you're trying to do some penetration testing is also an important part of you becoming a penetration tester or a security analyst. So let's look into this task or the task for Python basics. So in this room, you will get hands-on with and learn about the scripting programming language, Python. Although programming isn't required to succeed in security, it's a great skill to have, as the scripting for pen testers module demonstrate. Being able to program allows you to create security tools and create quick scripts that will aid you in hacking. So we have some programming concepts here, general programming concepts like variables, loops, functions, data structures, if statements, and files. So you will be using the code editor on the right hand side to complete exercises and solve challenges. This room will teach you the basics, just enough to give you the knowledge to make your basic scripts. If you want to use your development environment to code, download Python on the official website, which gives you an IDE or integrated development environment to code in. Me, I'm actually using I do have installed Python here, and you would see I have Sublime Text. That's the editor that I use for coding Python. So here in programming, syntax is important. It says here in programming, syntax is important as it describes the structure of a valid programming language. So it's like you're communicating with the computer. You're talking with the computer using the programming language. In simple terms, syntax tells the computer how to read code using rules that control the structure of symbols, punctuations, and words of a programming language. Run what's currently in the code editor by clicking the green Run Code button on the right hand side of your screen and move on to the next task. So that's our first task. You will see here, we can try to run. And we have a keyword here that is built in Python, and we have open and closing parentheses that encloses a string of text or string of words that will be displayed on our code output here. So to begin, let's create a simple program that outputs some text. So you would see here we have the hello world, which is a common practice for total beginners. You would be able to print the text hello world. It's just a convention. As you can see from the example code block above, it's just one line shown on line 2. And when we run this code, it will output the text hello world. Let's break this down. In the example line is a comment line, so it's referring to this. Comments are useful, especially if you're going to be writing your pseudocode. It's good that you try to think of the logic on how your code will be running. Let's say, for example, here we write your Python code here, and it helps you as a developer to understand what you're trying to do in your code, and also other developers if you're collaborating with them. So a line starting with a hashtag symbol, and this will not be run by the computer. You will see it did not got outputted here on our code output. A comment is written by the programmer, you, to help other people reading the code understand what is going on. We can control what is output to the screen by using the print statement. So this is a print statement built in Python. Anything inside the parentheses will be output. However, because we are printing a string, more on the data types later, because a string is one type of data in Python or in other programming languages, and we have to put them inside of quotations. Please note that this room examples are for Python 3 version, because there's also Python 2. On the code editor, print hello world, what is the flag? And if we try to just replace this with hello world, run the code, and we get the flag for this task. Okay, so now let's cover mathematical operators and how they can be applied to Python. Like a calculator, there are operations such as adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Using Python, we can code our own calculator. After all, programming is just writing rules for the computer to follow given specific inputs and conditions. The table below shows the different operations. So we have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulus, and exponent. So these are some of the examples here. Now that we know basic mathematical operators, let's move on to the comparison operators. This play a big part in Python and will be built upon when we look at loops and if statements. These operators are used to evaluate a program's condition at a particular state. Is it greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to? You will see there's the exclamation mark, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. In the code editor, print the result of 21 plus 43. So let's just go replace this with, of course, we removed the quotation because we're now going to be using integers. So in JavaScript, you are required to put a semicolon, but in Python, that's not that much big of a deal, and it doesn't use semicolon. So if we try to run this, we now have THM addition. If you're familiar with the programming language or scripting language, JavaScript, usually we end with a semicolon. Print the result of 142 to 52. What is the flag? So we have 142 minus, so that's minus, not plus, 52. Run the code, and we got the flag THM subtract. Print the result of 10 times 342. What is the flag? 10 multiplied by 342. So let's run that, and we now have THM multiplication Python. Print the result of 5 squared. What is the flag? So we know that if we would want to have a square, if you go back to our example here, we have an exponent, so we just need to, we can try to copy this as an example. So 5 squared, so we want to square 5, so 5 squared. Let's see how that will run, and there's the exponent power. Okay, so we just use that as an example. So we have the THM exponent power. Now let's look into variables and data types. So variables allows us to store and update data in a computer program. You have a variable name and store the data to that name. So here we have food, and we are assigning the string ice cream. So here in mathematics, we are commonly referring to the equal sign as equals to, right? But here we are assigning, this is a value pair. We have a food, we are assigning the text ice cream, and here we have money, and we are assigning the value 2000, okay, which is an integer, and this is a string. In the example above, we have two variables. The variable name food stores the string words ice cream, while another variable called money stores a number or integer 2000. Variables are powerful as you can change them throughout your program. It's like a bucket of information. You're placing contents into that bucket. That's just the idea here, so that you can reuse that within your program, and it's a lot easier for you to identify what that is used for, because you're giving it a name of some sort that is a lot readable, human readable. Okay, so the following example sets the age variable to 30. Then we increase this age variable by 1, making the final variable data 31. Feel free to copy and paste this into the editor, run the code, and see its output. So if we try to go and copy this, so we have age 30, age, and we assign it the value of this variable age plus 1. You would see this will be outputting 31. So it's line by line. So the most important thing to remember when you're programming is that you try to understand what the logic behind the instructions that you're giving the computer, because that's the only way that the computer will be able to understand you. Unlike with a person-to-person communication using the English language, for example, even if I make a mistake with my language, my use of the language, you will still try to comprehend what I'm trying to tell you, but the computer will not understand whatever you're trying to tell it if you're making a mistake with the syntax that you have made or you have written for it to understand the instructions that you're giving the computer. So notice on line 2 the way we update variable on the left, and we have the already created variable named age followed by the operator on the right. We have what we are setting the variable to. In our case, the age variable, which is currently set to 30, is being increased by 1. So we have data types, which is the type of data being stored in a variable. You can store text, numbers, and many other types. The data types to know are strings, integers, float, boolean, and list. So we have here used for combination of characters such as letters or symbols. We have whole numbers. Float numbers will be having decimal points or for fractions. And boolean used for data that is restricted to true or false options. So series of different data types stored in a collection. That's what is a list. You have a string, float, integer, boolean, and a list. Alice and Bob. For example, here we have Charlie, Daniel, and Evie. In the code editor, create a variable called height and set the value to 200. We don't need a semicolon. In JavaScript, you'll need for you to be able to write a good JavaScript code, you need a semicolon, but in Python that's not required. On a new line, add 50 to the height variable. So assigned height plus 50. On another new line, print out the value of the height. So we want to print it, so we'll use this statement. And we have the height variable here. So now if we try to go and run this, we now have THM variables, and we were able to finish this set. So let's submit that. Now let's look at logical and Boolean operators. So we know that logical operators allow assignment and comparisons to be made and are used in conditional testing, such as if statements. So we have here equal if x is equals to 5, less than if x is less than 5, less than or equal to if x is less than or equal to 5, greater than, and greater or equal to. Boolean operators are used to connect and compare relationships between statements. Like if an if statement, condition can be true or false. Let's say here we have a Boolean operator an example. Here, this Boolean operator will need both conditions to be true, or both statements to be true. That means if x is greater than or equal to 5 and x is less than and equal to 100, then return true if x is a number between 5 and 100. Okay? Now, for an OR Boolean operator, only one condition of the statement needs to be true. So here, if x is equals to 1 or x is equals to 10, then it will return a true value if x is 1 or 10. If a condition is the opposite of an argument not, if not y, returns true if the y value is false. Let's look at few Python code examples. We have a variable a. If a is equals to 1 or a is greater than 10, print either 1. So let's copy this so at least you'll get to see and have an idea. A is either 1 or above 10. So it printed out the value here. Okay. So here, let's see. Name Bob hungry is assigned the value of true. If name is equals to Bob and hungry is equals to true, print Bob is hungry. Else, if name is equals to Bob and not hungry, print Bob is not hungry. And else, and there's a comment here, if all other conditions are not met, print not sure who this is or if they are hungry. I know for a fact that this is not going to be working, guys, because I've tried this out before, and if we try to go and put this here, there's a bad input on line 6, so we'll need to do some debugging. So you will be encountering this if you're going to be writing code. So you'll see we have a bad input on line 10, and the issue here, guys, is because of this. It should not be else if. The keyword that you will need to look for, because when I was trying to debug this, I found out that the else if equivalent to Python is not else and if. Unlike with some other programming languages like JavaScript, for example, they have else if, the complete word else if. But in Python, we use elif. So you would see here, Bob is hungry is printed out because it returned true. And if, for example, we give this a value of false, Bob is not hungry. Okay, and if we give this a value of true, and if we give this a value of false, not sure who this is or if they are hungry. Okay, so because hungry is false and it's not true, and there's the keyword and here. In other programming languages, you will need to use this for and. And for or, you usually use the vertical bars here, but in Python we use the actual word and usually in other programming language we use the exclamation mark and equal sign for not equal to hungry, but here we are using the actual word not. And again, in other programming language we have else if rather than elif. Okay, so at least you got some ideas here, because you might have tested this out and you might be encountering the issue why this is not working, the else if here, because if we go back here you'll see that there's an input on line 1, because I was testing this out and I did some debugging, and that's a perfectly normal thing that you will be encountering if you're going to be writing code, especially scripts that you will be making. You'll be encountering issues like that. That's going to be a very common thing for programming developers or for programmers. The goal is to solve the challenge or the problem that is in front of you. Okay, so at least we were able to do that. We were able to find out how this works, and the example here. So rather than using else if, you need to use elif. Okay, so now that we understand the script that we have here as an example, just one tip of advice, of course, if you're going to be using tools that other developers or pen testers have done, it's really good that before you run any script, you check and try to understand how that script is working. This is going to be especially useful if you're doing some bug bounty hunting, and you'll be able to at least understand how the developers are doing their program, so that you will be able to find if there's something that you can try to exploit in the program that they have written that can be considered to be as a bug. So there we go, guys. We were able to execute this code example here, and we understood how it works by doing some debugging and reverse engineering, or let's say breaking down the process on how the computer understood the instructions that we have given it, through identifying the keywords here, and we did encounter a bug. So let's just go and answer the question below, and let's complete the task for task 5.